The chair was still spinning when I walked into the room. Not fast, just enough to make a faint creaking sound each time it circled past the desk. Her tea was still warm. Steam curled into the air like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just vanished in the middle of our living room conversation, mid-sentence, mid-lie, mid-smirk. I looked down. Her phone was on the floor, screen still glowing. The last text on it? I'll tell him tonight. Pack light. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I'd already read enough. I'd already seen too much. The photos, the messages, the calendar entries marked wellness retreat that turned out to be a man named Clay. She was gone. Not for long. I knew that. She always came back when the consequences started circling. But I wasn't going to wait this time. I walked upstairs. Not in a rush. Every step was quiet. Careful. Like the house might crumble if I moved too fast. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and stared at the empty hangers on the right side, the ones where her travel clothes used to hang. A sudden detail hit me like a slap. Her red scarf was gone. The one she wore the night we met. She hated that scarf, always said it made her look too wholesome. But now she had it with her. She was trying to rewrite something. Or maybe wrap something up. Downstairs again, I heard the chair tap softly against the desk as it finished another slow spin. I sat across from it and waited. Not for her, for myself. For the version of me who had finally stopped hoping, stopped excusing, stopped asking for explanations he already knew. The front door creaked open 23 minutes later. She stepped inside, hair slightly wet, like she'd rushed through a drizzle. Her breath caught when she saw me sitting there. Not in anger, not in accusation, but in silence. The kind of silence that only happens after something irreversible. She looked at the spinning chair, then at the teacup, then at me. I need to explain, she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. But the room was already empty, because I had already left hours ago. And she didn't know yet. By the time she noticed the envelope, I was already 3 states away. I hadn't planned it that way. I hadn't planned any of it, really. But the moment her words broke the air, I need to explain, and the doorframe stood between us like a verdict, something inside me finally detached. Not snapped. Just let go. Like a rope untying itself after holding too long. She hadn't noticed the envelope at first. I knew she wouldn't. She was too busy trying to read my absence like it was a sentence she could still finish. The hallway was empty. No coat on the hook. No shoes by the mat. No charger cable by the side table where I always forgot it. Her eyes flicked across the room like someone retracing a crime scene they didn't mean to create. But when she saw the piano, my grandmother's upright, the one I never learned to play, the one she used to dust like it was hers, she froze. The envelope was on the keys, angled neatly, the way you place something when you want it noticed but don't want it to scream. Her fingers trembled when she picked it up. I know because I saw it. I'd left the camera running. No, not out of cruelty. Not even revenge. I think I just needed to see her face when the lies ran out of hallway to hide in. It wasn't just about her being unfaithful. That's too clean a word for what happened. It was about how casual it all became. How the erosion wasn't a storm, but a slow, dry silence that wore down everything until all that was left was empty rituals and side glances. Inside the envelope was a photo, not of her and him. Not screenshots of texts. No expose. Just a photo of the storage unit receipt I'd signed 2 days earlier. And the key. That unit had everything I'd taken. My passport, documents, savings bonds, the watch she gave me on our 2nd anniversary, which, it turns out, she bought using points from a trip she never actually took with her coworkers. I didn't need much. I didn't want much. Just a clean exit. The note inside the envelope had only 6 words. You kept your stories. I left. I imagine she stood there for a long time. Maybe cried. Maybe tried to call. Maybe screamed into the echo of her own excuses. But by then, I was on a late-night train surrounded by strangers who didn't care what I'd left behind. And for once, that was a gift. It's strange, you know? You can spend a decade loving someone and still not realize when they've already stopped seeing you. I used to think love dies in arguments or infidelity or explosive moments. But the real death happens much quieter, like losing hearing in one ear and not noticing until someone whispers from the wrong side. She thought she had time to explain. She thought she could walk back in, use the right tone, press the right tears into the corners of her eyes, and I'd crack open just enough to listen. But the thing about silence, real silence, is that once it settles in, there's no space left for noise. Not even apologies. The next part of this story? It didn't go the way you'd think. She didn't chase me. She did something worse. And it's what she did next that turned this from a simple betrayal into something I never could have imagined. 2 days passed before I heard her voice again, but it wasn't coming from my phone. It was coming from a stranger's. I'd rented a temporary room in a lakeside Airbnb 3 hours north of Syracuse. The kind of place no one goes in May unless they're hiding or healing. I was doing both. My phone was turned off, not because I was avoiding her, but because I didn't want to find out she wasn't trying to reach me at all. There's a different kind of pain when someone doesn't chase you, even after you give them the chance. That afternoon, I stopped at a small convenience store near the lake to get coffee and Advil. The clerk, a wiry teenager with earbuds half tucked under his hood, was arguing with someone through his phone speaker. I wasn't listening at first, but then a familiar voice cut through the static, unmistakable even with the grainy audio. "Tessa," she was shouting, not crying, shouting. "I don't care what he saw. You told me everything was gone." I froze between the granola bars and dog food. The kid hissed something back into the phone and glanced at me, not because he recognized me, but because I was clearly standing there with my jaw nearly unhinged. I waited until he hung up and walked outside with his Gatorade. Then I followed. I asked him casually, too casually, "Hey man, was that a Tessa you were talking to?" He gave me a look that said, "Don't be creepy," but then shrugged. "Yeah, why? She's my wife." He narrowed his eyes. "Ex. Almost." He studied me for a beat, then looked around and lowered his voice. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but she sounded real pissed. Said someone took a drive from her safe. Like a flash drive or something." I didn't respond. Just walked away. My legs felt like rebar. Because I had taken something, but not on purpose. When I packed the storage box, I cleared the drawer where we kept old tax stuff and backup photos. I didn't check every drive. I thought it was just files and wedding pictures. Now I knew why she wanted to explain, and it had nothing to do with love. I went back to the room and found the drive inside a zip-up pouch in the bottom of the duffel bag. Plugged it into my laptop. And what I saw wasn't photos. Not ours, anyway. Not even of people. It was money. Spreadsheets. Transfers. Names I didn't recognize. Shell companies. A man named Grady Lowell was listed over and over. That wasn't my name, but it was close enough to make me nauseous. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't some romantic escape. It was a laundering operation. And my name, my life, was now threaded somewhere in the wiring of it. I sat still for 10 minutes, listening to the wind scratch against the window. There's something unreal about realizing your marriage was just a cover. Not for loneliness. Not for emptiness. But for criminal logistics. Tessa hadn't fallen out of love with me. She'd never been in it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this wasn't even the worst part. That came when I found out who Grady really was, and how long he had been living in my shadow. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just sat in the hard wooden chair beside the window, the flash drive still warm from the laptop, the name still burned into my head. Grady Lowell. 23 transactions. 7 offshore accounts. Tessa's email embedded in half the PDFs. Around 4 a.m., I realized the drive contained more than spreadsheets. One folder had been password protected, but it wasn't military grade. Just lazy encryption. I cracked it using her birthday, something she'd once joked no one would ever guess because I lie about it to everyone but you. Inside were surveillance images. Blurry but clear enough. Shots from airports, parking garages, diners. Sometimes Tessa was in them. Sometimes just a man in a ball cap. Sometimes both. But the one that turned my blood to ice was taken just 3 months earlier. It was a high-angle black and white frame from a parking garage, dated January 28th. The timestamp was 5:39 p.m. Tessa stood beside a man, tall, stiff posture, wearing a gray coat I'd never seen before. His face was turned partially toward the camera. And I swear to you, it was my face. Not similar. Not a little like me. It was me. My jawline. My ears. My awkward slouch. My nose, slightly bent from when I fell off a skateboard in 10th grade. For a second, I actually thought it was me. That I had blacked out, or been drugged, or gaslit. But I didn't own that coat. I wasn't in that garage. I had never been to that part of town. And the camera feed said it all. This version of me was laughing. I don't laugh like that. I haven't in years. I printed the photo and stared at it until the paper curled from the heat of the cheap motel printer. I wasn't imagining this. Tessa had a second life. But the cruelest part was she didn't share it with another man. She shared it with another version of me. Someone who looked like me, moved like me, sounded close enough to pass. I called a friend from my college days, Paul, now an investigator for a legal firm in Chicago. I didn't explain everything, just asked him to run the name Grady Lowell through a few private systems he had access to. He said it would take some hours. By noon, he called me back. "You're not gonna like this," he said. "Grady Lowell isn't you. He's real. Born in Michigan, same age as you, eerily similar background. But he's not you. He's got a sealed record from 2012, and this is weird, his old aliases include your exact full name." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" "He used your name from 2013 to 2017. Social media, temporary licenses, fake addresses. Then dropped it. And no one flagged it? No one noticed. Or no one wanted to." The phone went silent for a moment, then he added, "Lowell, this guy's either the worst coincidence in your life, or someone planted you to be him." I hung up before he could ask more questions. I knew Paul. He'd dig anyway, but I wasn't ready to hear what he'd find. I took one last look at the motel room. My bag was already packed. I tossed the drive into a padded envelope and mailed it anonymously to Paul's office. And then I hit the road again. But this time, I wasn't running from Tessa. I was chasing the man who'd been pretending to be me, long before I even knew he existed. I didn't have a plan, only a name, Grady Lowell, and a face I couldn't unsee, my own, smiling beside my wife, inside a parking garage that I'd never stepped foot in. The resemblance wasn't eerie anymore. It was offensive, personal. Someone out there had rewritten pieces of my life like I was a character in a story, and I just stumbled into the final act without a script. Paul messaged me a few hours after I got back on the highway. He'd found a P.O. box tied to one of Grady's old aliases, a small town in upstate New York I'd never heard of, Dunning Hollow. It sounded like the kind of place that only exists on local maps and ghost story podcasts. I arrived just after dark. There were no streetlights on the outskirts. The GPS glitched halfway there and left me driving blind along a cracked road lined with pine trees. But as soon as I crossed into town, I felt something odd, not fear. Familiarity, which made no sense. The corner gas station looked like something out of 1994. The same soda machine I used to beg my dad to let me use as a kid. The smell of wet pavement after a light rain. Even the diner across the street, Esther's Place, had that buzzing fluorescent hum I couldn't place until I realized it was the same sound I remembered from a dream I'd had more than once. The exact same. Something was wrong. I checked into a roadside and under a fake name. The woman at the front desk gave me a long look and said, "You're not from around here, are you?" I lied. "Passing through for work." She nodded, but didn't believe me. That night, I walked the streets like I was trespassing in someone else's memories. Every turn felt almost rehearsed. I found the P.O. box building. It was closed, but I knew I'd return in the morning. I needed sleep, but the idea of laying down in a bed felt absurd when I didn't even know who I was running from anymore, or who I was running as. I couldn't shake the thought. What if Tessa had fallen in love with that other version of me? What if this was never about betrayal in the traditional sense, but something far stranger? Something intentional? At 2:47 a.m., I was woken by a knock. Not on the door. On the window. I froze. My breath caught mid-rhythm. There was a shadow outside, not full, not clear, just movement. I crept toward the curtains, pulled them slightly apart. There he was, standing no more than 15 feet away, wearing the same gray coat from the photo. Calm. Still. Grady Lowell. Or whatever he called himself now. He didn't run. Didn't move. He just stared through the glass as if he were the one looking at a ghost. Then, with a nod, a literal, polite nod, he turned and walked into the woods behind the inn. I didn't follow. Not yet. Because I realized something in that moment that shook me deeper than anything Tessa ever did. He wasn't there to hurt me. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He looked prepared, like he'd been waiting for this exact meeting. And I was the one arriving late to my own story. I didn't sleep after I saw him. How could I? I sat in the corner of that cheap motel room, knees pulled up like a kid at summer camp waiting for something to crawl out of the woods. But nothing did. By sunrise, the woods were still and empty again, as if he'd never been there. Maybe he hadn't. But the boots imprinted in the soil beneath my window said otherwise. At 7:03 a.m., I returned to the post office. The clerk inside was an older man with a smile so wide it felt rehearsed. He asked if I needed help, and I told him I was looking for a box number registered to Grady Lowell. He looked me up and down, then muttered, "Didn't expect you back so soon." That sentence rattled me. I asked, "Have we met?" He leaned in. "You rented that box last year. You don't remember?" The back of my neck turned cold. No, that wasn't me. He studied me with a frown like I was lying to him. Or worse, like I was lying to myself. Well, he said, sliding a key across the counter, your face doesn't lie. I took the key, trying not to show how badly my hands were shaking. The box was near the bottom row. I inserted the key, turned, and opened the small metal door. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a single photograph. The paper simply said, Clock Repair Shop. Ask for the room in the back. The photograph was of me, or him, sitting beside Tessa at a table. She was smiling, her hand resting lightly on his chest. He looked calm, like he belonged there. I couldn't tell if it was photoshopped. If it was flawless. I drove to the shop. It was only 3 blocks away, tucked between an abandoned pharmacy and a bait store. The windows were fogged, and the sign hanging above the door just said Pine and Pendulum. Inside, it smelled like oil and oak dust. Hundreds of clocks lined the walls, ticking at slightly different rhythms. The air buzzed with subtle dissonance. An old woman behind the counter barely looked up. Looking for the room, she asked before I even opened my mouth. Yes, I said, quietly. She motioned to a curtained hallway behind her. He said you'd come. My feet felt like they weighed 40 pounds each, but I moved. I passed beneath the curtain, through a narrow passage, and opened the unmarked door at the end. The room was dim, silent, and empty at first. Just a table, 2 chairs, a strange device on the wall with blinking lights and cables running to a black box beneath it. Then I saw him, standing beside the table, leaning casually like we were about to play a game of chess. Grady, my mirror. I didn't expect you to take this long, he said. His voice was nearly identical to mine, but slightly more confident, like someone who had lived just a little less afraid. Who the hell are you? I asked. He smiled gently. You already know. No, I said, my voice cracking. I don't. Are you some kind of brother? A twin? Some sick con artist? He shook his head. Not a twin. Not even a stranger. I'm what you would have been, if she hadn't taken you first. That sentence hit like a hammer through glass. Tessa? I asked. He nodded. She didn't just lie to you. She shaped you, controlled you, broke you into the man who wouldn't ask questions, who would follow, who would stay quiet. She's done it before. She chooses the same mold. She finds a man full of potential, bleeds him into predictability, then moves on. I felt like the room was spinning. And what? You're some version she missed? Not missed, he said. Escaped. I didn't know what to believe. My head was pounding. Why the photos? The money? The drive? He sat down and leaned forward. Because she's moving again. New identity. New country. New story. But this time, she used both of us to build it. You were the placeholder. I was the insurance. And if you hadn't disappeared, she would have buried you in paperwork, debt, and silence. You'd vanish, and no one would even look for the body. I couldn't breathe. She came home to explain, he added, but not because she was sorry. Because you left too soon. You wrecked her timing. And now, he smiled faintly. Now she'll come looking for both of us. Grady handed me a burner phone before I left the shop. He didn't explain what it was for, and I didn't ask. I was still reeling from the conversation, from the idea that my entire personality might have been shaped by someone else. It sounded insane. It was insane, but it also made too much sense. Tessa had never needed to scream or threaten. She guided me through years of compromise like a pianist easing a melody out of damaged keys. I thought I was choosing my life. Turns out I was following one she'd written. Outside, the air smelled like rust and rain. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove west, no destination, just a need to stay moving. I passed silent cornfields, sleepy diners, blinking gas station signs that buzzed like broken dreams. My mind kept circling back to that phrase Grady had said, you were the placeholder. I was the insurance. At a rest stop, I finally turned on the burner phone. It lit up immediately, no lock screen, just a message thread already open. One message, waiting. Unknown. He told you, didn't he? I stared at the text for a full minute before replying. Me. Who is this? The typing bubbles began almost immediately, and then stopped. Then again. Then stopped. Whoever it was, they were thinking carefully. Finally. Unknown. She knows where you are. I didn't respond. My eyes scanned the parking lot. Empty. Just a couple of trucks and a minivan. But something in my gut started to turn. That buried, crawling instinct that says you're being watched. I threw the phone in the glove compartment and peeled out of the lot. I took back roads, kept off the highways, used cash for gas. But 2 hours later, I saw it. A red car. It was behind me on Route 48. Nothing special, a standard Ford Fusion. Tinted windows. No front plate. It didn't follow close. It didn't tailgate or make sudden moves. But it stayed exactly 4 car lengths behind me for 43 minutes. I tested it. Took an unexpected right onto a gravel road. Looped back toward the highway. Even stopped at a closed rest area and waited in the car. The Fusion pulled into a gas station across the street and parked diagonally, never got out. It wasn't paranoia. It was protocol. She was hunting. When I finally lost the car by ducking through a construction zone and onto a farmer's access trail, I pulled over and just sat there, heart pounding. I kept telling myself, there's no way she's capable of this. But I remembered the storage unit, the drive, the duplicate identities, the money trails that connected to men who'd all vanished. I opened my laptop, connected through a secure proxy, and started digging. I looked up Grady again, this time going deeper. I didn't find his birth certificate. I didn't find school records. I found a single obituary entry from 1994. A child named Grady Lowell, age 8, died in a boating accident off the coast of Maine. No siblings listed. Parents were listed as unknown, which meant someone, this Grady, had adopted that name, used it, molded it into something useful. The question was, did Tessa give him that identity, or did he give it to her? A second message came through on the burner. Unknown. If you want the truth, come to where it started. Friday, 6 p.m. You'll know the house. That was all. No address. No threat. Just confidence. They knew I'd come. And the worst part? They were right. Because I did know the house. Even though I'd never been there. Even though I shouldn't have. Even though it hadn't existed. Not in my life. Anyway, for almost 20 years. I drove for 6 hours without stopping. The message hadn't included an address, but somehow I still knew where to go. That's the thing about buried memories. They don't stay buried. They wait. Just beneath the skin. All it takes is the right whisper to bring them back up. The house was exactly where I felt it would be. Outside a town called Hollow Ridge, past a row of willow trees that looked half dead and half haunted. It sat alone on a hill, cracked chimney leaning, porch steps half rotted, but the frame intact. And the moment I saw it, I remembered. This was where my father brought me when I was 5, before he left for good. A family friend owned it, or so I'd been told. I hadn't been back since. But I remembered the slanted floors, the scent of pine and old wallpaper, the way the wind wrapped around the corners like it was trying to say something. I remembered crying in the upstairs bedroom when no one came to pick me up. I remembered being forgotten. And now, someone wanted me to remember all of it. I parked on the gravel slope and climbed the front steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled the same. Dry wood and thyme. A single lantern sat on the kitchen table, lit. Tessa was already there. She didn't look surprised. She looked tired. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Jeans and a sweater. Nothing like the polished woman I'd known. She wasn't here to convince or threaten. "You made it," she said. I didn't answer. She motioned to the chair. I sat. For the next 40 minutes, she spoke. Not like a criminal, not like someone selling a lie, but like someone peeling off a mask they'd worn for too long. She told me everything. The short version? Grady was real. But he wasn't my enemy. He was her escape once, years before me. He'd helped her fake an identity after she fled an abusive fiancé, but over time, they turned it into something more. Something profitable. The fake names. The disappearing trails. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. Safety. Power. She admitted she got used to living in versions of the truth. That she chose me because I was kind, careful, and wouldn't ask questions. "But I didn't mean to fall for you," she said, eyes glassy. I didn't know whether to believe that. I still don't. "I thought I could do it right this time," she said. "Leave clean. Leave you protected. But you were smarter than I thought. You left first." That's the part one never planned for. We sat in silence. No accusations. No tears. She stood, walked over to a cupboard, and pulled out a folder. Inside, papers. Real ones. Legal. My name cleared from any trace of the financial trail. A notarized affidavit from Grady, an alias specialist working under immunity, stating I had no knowledge, no involvement. Everything wiped clean. "I owed you this," she said. "It's not forgiveness, I know. But it's freedom." She left the folder on the table and walked toward the door. Paused. "You don't have to hate me," she said without turning. "But I hope you don't follow me." And then she was gone. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the lantern to flicker low. But something had shifted. Not rage, not sorrow, just relief. I wasn't broken. I wasn't weak. I had made it out before the damage became permanent. I had chosen my own ending, and that choice mattered more than the betrayal. Weeks later, I started over. Different town, new job, no secrets. For the first time in years, I began rebuilding not just my life, but myself. And one day, at a bookstore cafe, I met someone. Not in a movie kind of way. No sparks or instant connection. Just two people sharing a quiet table and a conversation about books. She had kind eyes and a terrible laugh. But when I asked for her name, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's my real one." And I believed her. Because this time, I knew what not to ignore. And for the first time in a long, long while, I was finally free.